Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to ASDC's Thursday Train to Win webinar. Today's topic is building your volunteer base. We'll cover a lot of the methods and opportunities that we have to engage volunteers and how we start early and why it is important to start early. We'll hear a lot of best practices from the states on what state Democratic parties are doing to engage volunteers and to begin the process of building their base very early. And additionally, we hopefully will hear from you regarding some of your best practices that you've employed in your states to begin engaging your activists and your supporters in the process of building the volunteer base in your state. So let's go ahead and dive in. Just as we begin our webinar, I want to remind you of a few housekeeping items. First, you are in listen-only mode as an attendee to this webinar, but if you have a question, you can feel free to type them in the questions box or click the raise my hand icon and we'll make sure that we get your questions read and answered. Additionally, if you are tracking with us on social media, and we hope that you do, you can use the mentioned Twitter accounts or the hashtag #TrainToWin. As that is the name of our webinar series, so we hope that you will capture a few bits from our webinar today and share them on your social media networks. Again, as a review of the agenda today, we'll finish up with our introduction and our reminders. We'll talk about building your volunteer base, and I'll be leading this particular Train to Win webinar. We'll have Q&A, and you can also feel free to type your questions as we go throughout the webinar, and so we'll make sure that those get answered. And then we'll have our closing and evaluation, and we'll talk a bit about how you can give us feedback about today's webinar. So as we think about the process of building a volunteer base, many state parties and many campaigns think to themselves, it's April and it's way too early to begin building a volunteer operation or to begin thinking about volunteers and how we utilize them and how we engage them. But I want to encourage you as we go through our webinar today to begin building now. And as I've heard from so many state parties about ways that they are engaging volunteers, I'm reminded of how important it is to begin engaging volunteers in really creative ways and start that process now. So the question of why we build now is answered in a few different ways. The first is that winning in the field and winning campaigns and electing Democrats is about list building, right? We need lists of voters to turn out to support our candidates. We need lists of people who are going to give us money as donors. And in the very same vein, we need lists of volunteers who are going to support us and help us get to our win goals. So building a volunteer organization and beginning early with building your list is the key to having an effective army of volunteers later on down the road when you have a lot more of volunteer needs and things ramp up and become a little bit more hectic. The second is that there is no magic formula for having a successful volunteer organization. So you'll have to try some of the tactics that we're talking about, and some of them may not be as useful for your particular state party or for certain areas of your states. But because there is no magic formula, we have to start early figuring out what works with engaging volunteers. So thinking about this as really a kind of a trial and error process, you want to effectively begin building your list through early volunteer engagement. Last, it can be hard to motivate volunteers to get involved. Some of us got involved in politics through being a volunteer, but because we loved Democrats or because we loved the party or because it was such an exciting opportunity or an exciting candidate. But we have to remember that a lot of volunteers that we're looking to engage in our organizational building and our capacity building in the field are not inherently motivated to volunteer. So beginning the process of engaging them early helps us really to move the needle with volunteers, just as we move the needle with voters in the field. So beginning that engagement early is incredibly important, especially when you're battling low levels of motivation. Lastly, or second to last, state parties can be a real asset to campaigns when we begin the process of building a volunteer base. Now, many of the campaigns in your states haven't really ramped up, and a lot of them are still figuring out what their field strategy will be, and maybe some of them have a candidate but don't have a clear volunteer plan. State parties who are looking to support those efforts can really be an asset if they've already begun the process in engaging key volunteers who can be really helpful to the campaigns that we're supporting. So this helps the state party to be relevant and to be an asset to what's going on this election year. Lastly, it's the first step to building a long-term sustainable organization. And as state parties, we know that we'll be around when campaigns are not around, when it's not an election year, a big election year, and when these campaigns leave and staff go back to their states. We are going to be responsible for moving Democrats forward, and we're going to be responsible for holding Democrats accountable and Republicans accountable across the state. So if we're thinking about building long-term infrastructure, we have to make sure that key volunteers are engaged and that we have a process for them staying engaged for the long term. So as we think about the tools for building a volunteer base, one of the first things that I did was begin surveying the states and figuring out what folks were doing early on to begin engaging volunteers. And so a lot of what we'll discuss are best practices that states have employed for building a volunteer base and engaging volunteers early. So as we go through these tools, I'll share with you a lot of best practices that the states have sent in. We did a brief survey and asked people what they were doing. So listen out for your state, hopefully, and additionally, hopefully, these are tools and tactics that you can use and scale. The first is communications and digital. So we'll talk a bit about how we can use volunteers to amplify the message. Grassroots organizing, so how we can get volunteers out in the field in the very early stages. Third is outreach, so how we can get folks talking one to another in very genuine, very grassroots-based outreach efforts. The second to last is grassroots fundraising, so all state parties need money to operate and to function, and there are volunteers out there waiting to be engaged who can really help you in those efforts. Lastly is training, and I don't put training there just because I love it. I put training there because this really is a way for us to engage volunteers by equipping them with skills and knowledge and really not making volunteerism a one-sided thing where we're getting something from them, but also making it a give and take where we're giving them skills and knowledge that are going to help them be effective community organizers long term. So these are the 5 tools for building your volunteer base, and we'll dive into these throughout the course of the webinar. The first is communications and digital. Now, as we think about these 5 tools, I really want you to think of this more so in terms of providing avenues for volunteer engagement and providing access points for different kinds of volunteers. We know that not every volunteer is going to go out and knock doors or necessarily lead a voter registration event, etc., but we know that every volunteer has something to give and has something to add to the value of state parties and campaigns. So thinking about these as multiple avenues for engagement is really a helpful frame of reference. So in the way of communications and digital, Factivist programs. Now, the DNC has recently launched a really great Factivist program that helps everyday Democrats fight back against some of the harsh Republican attacks, some of which is not true, some of it is skewing of the facts, misrepresentation, if you will, and many of these same things are happening in your states. Extremist Republican legislators are saying a lot of crazy things, are spewing a lot of misinformation to voters, and so developing a state or a local, what we can call Factivist program, really can be an opportunity for volunteers to engage on the messaging front for pushing back. Because it's one thing for the state party to push back, and it's another thing for us to set out an army of folks through social media and through other means to really combat a lot of the things that are being said that we know aren't true. We all get those emails from those crazy forwards from our aunts and our uncles and our family members like Obama is doing this or Congressman so-and-so is doing this. This is crazy. This person is, extremist. And a lot of the things we find are not true. And so having a state-based Factivist program can really be an opportunity for people to engage, to get the facts, and to act. Additionally, putting out talking points or select messages that you want people to amplify can be an opportunity for them to take to the internet or take to social media and help fight back with that. Second, of course, our conventional, well, now seemingly conventional because everyone uses it, Twitter and Facebook. Now, we know that 1 in every 5 minutes on a cellular device or on a laptop is spent on some sort of social media site. And that is an overwhelming statistic. And that means that people are engaging with a lot of their political news and a lot of their political knowledge online. And so using your social media accounts as the state parties, but also asking folks to use their social media accounts to amplify the message and to push key messages that we want to use to fight back against Republicans is a really great opportunity for us to begin the process of gaining followers and gaining folks who can be message amplifiers, but also it's an opportunity for us to build our list. If you're tweeting folks to sign petitions or to call their congressmen or to take action on a certain issue, that gives you an opportunity to build a list on email that you can use to then reach out to folks and say, we'll come out to this particular event that we're having or support this candidate through this effort. It's a great opportunity to do just that. And so this is really a great list building opportunity. So I hope that if you haven't begun the process of building a social media presence and using it to amplify the Democratic message, that you'll do that. Third is letters to the editor. Letters to the editor can be a really powerful way for people to, again, fight back with personal story and information they know to be true. And some people prefer to take to pen and paper to express their ideas, and social media may not be the way that they choose to sound off. So providing that additional avenue is really important, particularly if you have volunteers in districts where social media is not really something that people use a whole lot. Second to last, personal story submissions on key issues. Volunteers have some of the best stories, and I've seen across your social media, your Twitter accounts, your press releases across the states that people are using personal story to amplify the message in a way like we've never seen. And people can connect more readily with the issues through reading a volunteer story or understanding how Obamacare, or unemployment, or gun violence is having an impact. So requesting that people submit their personal stories or share with you experiences that they're having is a really great opportunity to, again, list build, because you're asking people to make these submissions via email, but also to use this as a messaging bank so that you can, in an election year where things are getting a little bit more busy, you'll have an opportunity to use these same stories that you've collected from volunteers about how this message is affecting folks. Two great examples of this happening in the states. Texas actually has a wonderful program called the Texas Voices program. And if you're on this webinar, it's a shout out to you. They actually have a local surrogate program where they engage teachers, doctors, veterans, and folks who are local community members in the process of sharing their stories and speaking out publicly on issues that impact them. And this is a great way to get, again, use those local voices, but also to rally people's friends and family around the issue. And it really does create a base of support and activism that can be very, very helpful. Beyond just the submission of stories, Kansas is using this as a way for people to talk about what victory means in 2014 for them. And so they've actually started a video project that just asks people to take a short video of yourself talking about why we need to win in 2014, to either submit it or to tweet it or to share it on social media in some way. It's a really good way to get everyday activists and Democrats involved in messaging these issues in a real way. Lastly, opposition research. Now, a lot of folks get their information from the internet, and so for that reason, we know that there's always news stories and things floating around on the internet, making sure that we know what's going on in the world. And so using volunteers who do have a passion for research or for collecting information, using that as an opportunity to collect, clips of what Republicans are doing in your state or what Democrats are doing in your state, and using that to compile information that volunteers and that activists and that even donors may want to know. And so I'd encourage you, if you have a volunteer that has that skill set and has that strength, to deploy them to do some opposition research on what's going on in your state, what's going on with the candidates in 2014. You may not have a robust research operation, and so this may be a good way to take advantage of a volunteer who wants to help in that way. So on the communications and digital front, this is a really good opportunity that you have to engage volunteers very, very early on. It's April and the election's in November, but there will be constant news cycle from now until then. So engaging volunteers and helping to amplify the message helps you to build your list, helps you to compile stories or to figure out where you have local surrogates and people who can speak on issues. And the list building opportunities allow you to then contact more people in the future about volunteer opportunities and things that your party is doing as it gets closer to the election. So that's on the communication and digital front, a way that you can begin to engage volunteers. And again, if you have questions, you can type them into the questions box and we'll make sure that they get answered throughout the presentation. The next front that we want to talk about how to engage volunteers is through grassroots organizing. Now this is what we think of as the typical boots on the ground, getting people out there, talking to voters. And this is probably the way that you prefer most of your volunteers engage, right? You want them out there talking to voters because that is how we win. Three main areas that folks in the states are engaging volunteers currently in the field realm is through voter registration, voter contact, and through holding Congress accountable, or folks being congressional watchdogs. Now I'll talk specifically about a few states that are really using these avenues as a way to get volunteers out in the field early talking to voters. On the voter registration front, both Utah and South Carolina have aggressive voter registration programs, registering thousands of folk who they've identified as unregistered voters, and it's really going to, of course, make a difference in the electorate there in those states, especially with the contested races. And with voter registration, you really have an opportunity to bring people in to do something that's very fundamental and very civic, right? Some people may not want to talk to voters about specific issues or messages, but they do like the opportunity to get voters registered because it makes them feel good and it helps expand the electorate for Democrats. Of course, there's the element of targeting, etc., that you want to be mindful of, but getting people out there registering voters can be nothing but an asset to your field programs. Voter contact. Now, Kansas has done a good job very early on of contacting sporadic voters and making IDs based on their candidates. They already have folks who are declared candidates, and they want to begin identifying early support scores and figuring out where there are people who they need to have more conversations with throughout the course of the year. So it doesn't mean you need to be having a get out the vote message or really heavy issues-based message. Just figuring out how you can how you can contact voters and leave those persuasion conversations for later is a really good opportunity to begin leveraging volunteers and introducing them to the power of field. And lastly, on the congressional watchdog front, we have a lot of states that are doing a really great job with holding their often loony Republican congressmen or congresswomen accountable. And they've done so via social media, but they've also organized days of action. They've lobbied. They've even, to the point in Louisiana, have made sure that when there's big news dumps on Fridays with the Republican governor, that they amplify what's being dumped. They make sure that Democrats and that people of Louisiana are aware of what's going on, so that there's nothing that slips by them and nothing is done in the dark. So as we think about volunteers that can be engaged for the purposes now of holding Congress accountable, it's a really great way to translate that grassroots power, that grassroots support, into what can be later just basic voter registration or voter contact activities. So a volunteer can fall anywhere here on the scale of voter registration, voter contact, or doing things that help to hold members of Congress accountable. But finding a place for these volunteers is a really key step in making sure that you can build that strength and, again, bring volunteers in and provide them multiple points of access. The third really important way that we can begin bringing volunteers in and engaging them early on is through our outreach efforts. Now, this is a bit different from what we discussed earlier in the realm of voter contact or voter registration. This is pure neighbor-to-neighbor outreach, and there are a lot of different ways that we can do that, utilizing the existing community networks to ensure that we've engaged every single community constituency that will potentially vote Democrat this election year that we can. We can do so first through House meetings. Maine is actually doing a great job of using this House meeting setting to just give briefings on what's going on in the campaign. People may not read the emails necessarily, but bringing them together in an intimate setting and sharing things with them that are relevant to what's going on and what the state of play is in that particular state can be a really helpful way to create what we call a circle of insiders. And it's not to be exclusive, but it is to say that people are much more invested in what's going on through a campaign or through the state party if they feel like you're directly communicating it to them and that you value their engagement. So Maine has done a series of campaign briefings, and they've done it in a lot of different settings, and it's been a really effective tool that they've had in bringing people together all across communities in their state. State party open house. Now, a lot of folks are familiar with the work that campaigns do, but they're not always familiar with the kind of work that state parties do. And so using an open house as a way to bring people in, something very informal, light refreshments, et cetera, and talk with them about the state party's vision for that year. Now, it doesn't have to necessarily be an open house. It can be a town hall meeting. It can be a listening tour. But finding ways to share the vision gets people bought in on the ground level and helps to build that base level grassroots support. Lastly, we have liaising with local organizations. Now, there are a lot of organizations in your community that do keep going year-round in between major election years. Some of you have Young Democrats chapters. Some of them may not be as well organized, but there are, in some cases, Democratic women's clubs, nonprofits, churches, sororities, and fraternities. Some of you can make an exhaustive list of people in your community that are stakeholders that you want to make sure that you're reaching out to, because in an election year, these people are likely looking for ways to be active and to be a part of the democratic process, particularly if you're targeting well. You'll find people who want to help elect Democrats. So making sure that you're reaching out to those folks and figuring out, yes, how can we get people involved in the process of creating change in this community? Give them a long-term, an opportunity for long-term investment, and find something immediate they could be doing. Could they be helping to host your voter registration drives? Could they help to hold Congress accountable to things that matter to their particular constituency? The possibilities there are endless, but starting in a place where you can at least have those conversations and reach out to major stakeholders is absolutely key. Grassroots fundraising. Now, we'll talk about this only in small measure because I know that a lot of states have very unique grassroots fundraising operations. Some of them do a lot of that through D4D or through a lot of other different programs, and they have some programs that are titled for their state party. But grassroots fundraising is one part fundraising, but also for volunteers who may be willing to give money to invest in the state party. Some of those folks may be able to give you, one Saturday a month or 2 Saturdays a month volunteering to actually talk to voters or to register voters. So in your small dollar events, making that ask of how much ever money you're asking for, but also having a secondary volunteer ask, right? Good organizers have not just one ask, but 2, right? Can you do this? But if you can't, give us money, or if money is not the way in which you want to contribute, having an opportunity for them to engage your party in some way. Last but certainly not least is training. Now, training is a great opportunity, as I said, to make the volunteer experience a give and take. We don't want to just use volunteers to get to our end result when it comes to winning elections, though that's what they sign up for as a volunteer. We want to make sure that we're equipping volunteers and leaders with skills that they can use throughout the campaign cycle, but even beyond that. So assessing what your needs are as an organization. Do you need volunteers that can use Vote Builder? Do you need volunteers that can tweet? Do you need volunteers that can organize voter registration events? What kind of volunteer needs can be met in your organization, and how can you use training to ensure that you have an army of equipped folks who can do the kind of work that's going to make us successful in November and beyond? And then take a needs assessment of the volunteers that you have. Do you have people who are coming in who are volunteering week after week, but they don't have the kind of skills to do campaign year or campaign or elections work? You want to make sure that you're taking an assessment of those volunteers and figuring out how can you develop them. If you showed them how to use VAN or gave them Vote Builder training, would that be an opportunity for them to then engage in a more meaningful way to help enter data on a campaign? Or if we showed them how to run a voter registration drive, could that pay you back tenfold in the number of people that they could register or the number of people that they could then train to register voters? So take the assessment and that will help you to then build a strategic plan for what kind of trainings that you should offer in your state. Now there is a laundry list of volunteer opportunities and volunteer trainings that are taking place across the state. And this is incredibly exciting to me because it means we're going to have hundreds and thousands of trained volunteers across the state this election year. Minnesota does a fantastic job of making sure that their activists, their organizers are trained. They did their Minnesota DFL training this past October. They had hundreds of folks who came in and wanted to learn the basics of what it was to be an organizer and what it was to help and support the party. Michigan has launched a series of training programs across the state called the Michigan Way, and that has been an incredibly successful program that has taught folks messaging and also helped them to be involved in the process of planning next steps for their communities. Maine has done 2-hour trainings for their municipal chairs on leadership, volunteer recruitment, coordinated campaign planning, and things of the like. So their volunteers are getting a well-rounded view of what election year looks like in Maine and how they can be a part of it. Louisiana has used their legislative session as training times where they can get people equipped so that once legislative session ends and volunteers and activists switch their focus entirely to campaigns, they want to make sure that they have the most trained, the best equipped activists out there. And so the only way to do that is to be strategic about how we roll out trainings and how we ensure that every volunteer that's getting engaged is well trained. Now for some of you it may be social media training. People need to know how to tweet. For some of you it may be training for lobbying Congress before the end of the session. For some of you may have vote by mail programs or a strong absentee program. These are all training opportunities, and there's no reason why we can't get volunteers equipped and trained to do the kinds of things that are going to help Democrats to win and help put votes in the bank for Democrats. And also as a note, the ASDC is here to help you develop these trainings for your volunteers. We've worked with a few of the states out there to put on trainings for their volunteers and know that it's made a difference in how they've built organization this year. And we want to help you do the very same thing. We have a lot of great templates that you can use in our training library, but if there's something that you need there to train your volunteers with, or if there's someone that you'd like for us to reach out to on your behalf to get them in your state's training, we're certainly willing to do that through the training department. So please just let us know. So some of you may be thinking, this is a lot of information, this is a lot of ways to engage volunteers, and I'm just not really sure where our bandwidth is. There's a great quote by Arthur Ashe, and it's one of my favorites. It says, "Start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can." Every state party is in a different place, and we should take advantage of the current opportunities and the current resources that we have to figure out how we can build a volunteer base, start early, and see it grow over time. One of the best ways is to do an initial or quick survey. Maybe this is you sending out an email that says, hey, we want to make sure volunteers get trained and get engaged. What ways would you like to help the party? Maybe you put a volunteer ask into each of your weekly blast emails. Or maybe it's that you have volunteers call other volunteers and figure out how we can get them engaged this election cycle. A lot of you have existing lists of volunteers. I know, again, to shout out Louisiana, they have a list of over 1,000 volunteers that they're already calling and contacting, and so that's fantastic to hear. I know a lot of you have volunteer lists that maybe you need to blow the dust off of and figure out how to get those people involved again. House meetings, focus groups, these are a good opportunity to figure out where people's needs are and how you can help to meet them and how you can help to get them engaged. Re-engage old volunteers. People who are most likely to volunteer are those who have volunteered before. So don't count out your old volunteers. These are people who can still be helpful to you this cycle. And lastly, and this is also something that Michigan is doing, pioneering a fellowship or an internship program. I think a lot of you already have something of this type or of this sort, but you're really losing out on a lot of free support by not having some sort of fellowship or internship program in your states. And if this is something you're interested in, touch base with us. We're happy to help you design it, or we're happy to connect you with states that are already doing this and it's working and they're seeing the benefits from it. So on this list of things that you can do to start, everyone is in a place to at least do one of these things, right? If not many of these things. So we want to continue to encourage you to take an introspective look at your organization and figure out how you can use one of these tactics right away to begin building that volunteer base and, again, watching it grow over time. So it's your party and your program. You know where your holes are. You know where your needs are. You know where volunteers can be best engaged. And so I want you to really take a look at your program and think to yourself, do we need people who are trained on Vote Builder? Do we need people who know how to register voters? Where are those needs, and how do we go about meeting them in creative ways? Things to remember, we have to be kind of flexible, and that's why the ball of rubber band's there. But building a volunteer organization and building a volunteer base is a marathon and not a sprint. This is why we're talking about starting early and being creative. Be realistic about the levels of engagement. Now, initially, you're not going to have the floodgates open, or you're not going to open your office one day and have 1 million people standing outside ready to volunteer. I think you already know that. But be realistic about how many volunteers that will be engaged early on. This may be 1 to start or 2, but it will grow if you're diligent and if you essentially water it like a plant. It will grow. So be flexible about avenues for engagement. Now, this was a best practice from South Carolina. They actually have had kind of a lot of creative field teams take shape, and it hasn't always looked in the traditional model or in the 2012 model, but that's okay because it's not 2012, it's 2014. So be flexible and be open to letting volunteerism in your state take shape in creative ways that suit the needs of your community but also support the party. Be creative about the metrics. So how are you quantifying your volunteer efforts in recruitment? Is it how many people did we reach out to this week, or how many people came in and made phone calls, or how many voters did we register? Be creative about assessing where your capacity is. But as good organizers do, use metrics. So have a way to measure whether your volunteer program is growing. Lastly, but certainly not least, be intentional about developing leadership. State Democratic parties, one of the biggest differences between us and campaigns, congressional or senatorial or presidential, is that we're concerned about the long-term success of the Democratic Party. We want to see Democrats engaged at every level year-round. And maybe that level of engagement is not as high when there's not an election, but that's all right. We want to make sure that we develop leaders that can then go win city council races or win special elections or win other local municipal races. We want to provide those avenues. And so with that, if you have questions, you're welcome to type them into the questions box. And just a friendly reminder that you can do so. Or if you would like to raise your hand and provide some additional insights, or you have a best practice you'd like to share, feel free to do so. And again, your social media reminders are there at the bottom of your screen. But again, I want to stress that these are avenues for engagement that have been proven to work in the states. These are things that your colleagues and your peers in the states are already doing, and they're seeing the return on it. This program may not look the exact same in your state, but we want to encourage you to build something and start early because that's what's going to be the formula for success in the field this year. Oh, there's a great question here in the questions box. It says, how do you engage unconventional constituencies? Okay. I guess by that you're thinking about constituencies that maybe haven't been a part of the party traditionally. Well, this is a great opportunity to start those conversations. Is there a large Hispanic population or Spanish-speaking population that hasn't been reached? Yes, well, this is a good opportunity while it's still April and everyone's not running crazy. Have that initial conversation with someone who's a leader in that community. Figure out ways that you can get that constituency involved and figure out ways that you can meet needs that they have in their community. Again, building this volunteer base is about give and take, and so you're in a prime position to have those conversations. Oh, someone wrote college. So yes, colleges are a great opportunity to recruit if you're putting together an internship program or a fellowship program across the state. It's a good opportunity to go to those campuses, figure out for political science programs, do people want to volunteer at the party? Is that something they'd be interested in doing? It's 2014, it's an election year, especially if you have targeted races. You can help the campaign by building those lists for them. So you can already say, hey, these are people who on this college campus who want to volunteer this year to help you out. So that's another way the party can be a great asset. Fantastic. Well, I don't see any additional questions in our questions box, so I want to thank you for joining today's webinar. Please take an opportunity to give us feedback about today's webinar, additionally webinars you'd like to see in the future, or additional types of training support that you'll need to either build this volunteer base or accomplish other objectives this election year. We want this program to serve you, and we want it to be helpful to you in the state. So please take an opportunity to fill out that webinar evaluation as it comes to your inbox shortly. Additionally, if you need anything, if you have questions, if you have training needs, you can reach me via email or via phone. My information is listed there at the bottom. And lastly, I want to thank all of you for joining and for being a part of today's webinar. We will look to connect with you again next Thursday. Thank you.